Kita temunya ada di sesat saya. Mau bicara? Saya speaker aja. Nah, ya kan, silakan. Di jadwal liburan yang dari kita buat nggak sama seluruh tempat libur nasional tanggal 19 April kita tuh ada kita masuk tanggal 16 April itu libur kita ada yang mungkin ada yang di tapi saya di tempat ada
Yes. Salamat siang. Magandang hapon, good afternoon, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. #Break the Bias, Heroes and SHEroes, Gender Perspective on Rights, Equality, and Protection. This is brought to you by the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia in collaboration with Miriam College Women and Gender Institute. I will be your host for this afternoon. Chot Reyes at your service. I hate to start this forum on a sad note, and I don't intend to drag the atmosphere down, but I'm pretty sure everyone knows that no country has fully achieved gender equality. But if it's any consolation, more and more people nowadays are becoming aware and educated on gender equality and its related issues. This afternoon, we are hoping to discuss more in depth how can we promote gender equality in our society, especially in our workplaces, and of course, the protection that a woman deserves as an equal member of the society. We are blessed to have two speakers, one from Indonesia and the other one from the Philippines. That means that issues to be discussed will be taken in Indonesian and Philippine context. And for everyone's information, our audience consists of both Filipinos and Indonesians. To start the ball rolling, may I request the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia's Ambassador Designate, His Excellency Agus Wijoyo, for his opening remarks.
Dr. Melanie Reyes, Executive Director of Miriam College Women and Gender Institute. Our speakers this afternoon from the Philippines, Professor Aurora Hafate de Dios, Senior Project Director of Miriam College Women and Gender Institute. From Indonesia, Naila Rizky Zakia, Advocacy Officer of Lintas Feminist Jakarta. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by expressing my sincerest gratitude to Miriam College's Women and Gender Institute, or WAGI, for collaborating with the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia to come up with this webinar on gender equality and women's rights, taking both the Indonesian and the Philippines perspectives on certain issues. It is very timely that we talk about gender equality because since the start of the pandemic in 2020, the gap between gender is obviously widening due to its impact. In 2021, the World Economic Forum reported that the global gender gap scored 67.7%, covering 156 countries. This meant that the gap was widened by almost 0.6 percentage points and 32.3% remain to close the gap. Indicators included economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. The Philippines ranked first in Southeast Asia, and while Indonesia ranked sixth. As we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic is not just a global health crisis, but a global economic downturn, as well with implications on gender equality. Measures used to deal with the surge of the pandemic, such as lockdowns, quarantine, business and school closures, work from home, put more pressures on women. Discussions on gender equality always call to end violence against women. Truth be told that inequality does exist for various unacceptable reasons. That's why institutes, centers, and organizations such as WAGI and Lintas Feminist Jakarta were established so that not only women but also men will be aware and educated of women's rights and protection as an equal member of the society. Harassment is the most common violation against women because it can happen in your own home, workplace, school, public places, anywhere, at any time. It is best to find a support group which you can turn to, will protect you, and will prevent the trauma from happening again. Last year, 2021, Minister Retno Marsudi issued guidelines for the implementation of gender mainstreaming and a circular concerning prevention and handling of sexual harassments in the ministry and all the Indonesian representatives across the globe. Hence, this year, Indonesian Embassy in Manila created a gender mainstreaming working group for any report or complaint regarding any acts of sexual harassment. Break the Bias, which is this year's campaign theme of the International Women's Day, calls for a world that is free of inequality. A day when the mathematical symbol to put between the male and the female is not greater than or less than, but equals. Because whether a hero or a shero, real or mythical, both are brave and can carry extraordinary deeds. Genetically, men and women's DNA is almost identical. They even have the same hormones but differ in ratio. The difference between the two biological. Although men and women may think and accept things differently, both needed to be heard and understood. Moreover, their differences should not be a reason to discredit or prefer one over the other. Instead, it should be a turning point to give them the respect they deserve instead of invalidating their feelings. Their differences should not be a basis of who is the weaker or who is the stronger one. American writer John Gray wrote a book entitled Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, which became highest ranked work of nonfiction of the 1990s. The truth is, men are not from Mars and women are not from Venus. They are the same species of the same planet. Once again, I would like to thank WAGI for making this webinar possible. Our two speakers, Professor Aurora Hafate de Dios and Ibu Naila Rizki Zakia, for accepting this invitation that would help create awareness and at the same time educate people that everyone can say no to abuse and violence. Magandang hapon pa sa inyong lahat. Good afternoon to all.
Thank you so much, His Excellency. And this time, the Executive Director of Miriam College Women and Gender Institute, or popularly known as WAGI, will give the welcome remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Melanie M. Reyes.
His Excellency Agus Widodo, Ambassador Designate of Indonesia to the Philippines, our speakers for this afternoon, Professor Aurora de Dios and Ms. Naila Sakiha, and to all our guests, friends, and colleagues who are able to join us in this Zoom webinar, a pleasant afternoon to all of you. Miriam College Women and Gender Institute is delighted to collaborate with the Indonesian Embassy in this webinar in observance of the Women's Month celebration. Ever since time immemorial, women have been rendered different from men. So-called differences and inequalities became widespread, even systematically, and had resulted in women being treated worse than men. However, it should be accentuated that these consequences are socially determined. They are all just socially constructed. This led us to unlearn and reconstruct such notions and slowly building an opposite world where men and women will be ultimately seen as equals. Equality between men and women is a necessity for democracy and an inherent aspect of human rights. As the title of this event connotes, there are not only heroes, but there are also sheroes. And this is what this webinar aims to bring forward. The achievement of gender equality signifies that everyone, regardless of gender, is given the opportunity to realize their full potential. This also means that whether in the private or public sector, men and women should have equal access to education, paid work, and meaningful decision-making power. Initiatives to counter gender discrimination and promote equality have been put in place in the Philippines in various areas. According to the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2021, the Philippines maintains Asia's top country in terms of bridging the gender gap. The Philippines has closed 78% of its total gender gap and was placed 17th out of 156 countries with the smallest gender gap. However, it is the second best in the whole East Asia and the Pacific region after New Zealand. In addition, it is the only Asian country in the top 20 tier. It is undeniable that violence and discrimination against women continue to be a serious issue in many countries, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. Globally, 243 million women and girls ages 15 to 49 have been subjected to sexual and or physical violence perpetrated by an intimate partner. All this data indicate how far we are from our main goal of gender equality. Given the fact that women and girls continue to encounter violence in practically every imaginable setting, including their homes, schools, buses, and city streets, we must acknowledge and remember that without the full and equal participation of women, no peace or progress will be possible. In this regard, there are two critical questions that seek to be answered today. When will we say that we have achieved gender equality, especially in the workplace setting? How exactly can we combat and prevent violence against women to achieve a just and equal society? With such a timely and significant topic to culminate Women's Month, this webinar will shed light on the answers to the proposed questions. We will comprehensively delve into a discussion on women's legal protection and rights, which includes preventing and combating violence against women. In connection to this, the main goals of gender equality, specifically in terms of equal access to education and equality in the workplace, will then be presented and discussed. Looking at gender equality through the lens of this webinar's title means including, respecting, and celebrating the SHEroes of the past and present, and recognizing that she deserves to be heard and seen as her own kind of hero. Together, let's begin to embody what real change towards equality for women could look like, shifting our perspectives on what equality, rights, and protection truly mean. With that said, I warmly welcome you all to this momentous event, and I hope today's discussions will pave the way towards progressive actions and practices in Philippines and Indonesia that will contribute to a just and equal future for all of us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reyes. Before we move on, let me cite some house rules that we need to follow. During the session, only the speakers are allowed to turn on their microphones. The rest, please stay muted. If you want to raise any technical concerns, please feel free to use the chat room at any time. And also, please feel free to use the Zoom chat room for your questions, and you may send them anytime as well. Please indicate the speaker to whom you are addressing your question to. For everyone's information, there is a live streaming happening at the same time at the official YouTube page of the Indonesian Embassy, and that's KBRI Manila or KBRI Manila. All is encouraged to share the live stream and invite friends to witness the program. Now going back, I would like to turn over the microphone to Ms. Rama Juwita, Third Secretary from the Social and Cultural Affairs of the Indonesian Embassy in Manila. She will be introducing our speakers for this afternoon and will facilitate the question and answer portion. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Rama Juwita.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chot, for hosting this event. I'm really glad to be the moderator today. I would like to greet our Ambassador Designate, His Excellency Agus Wijoyo. Thank you so much for being here with us to join us in our webinar today. And I would also like to greet Ms. Melanie Reyes, the Executive Director of Millennium College Women and Gender Institute. Also for joining us today, this afternoon. I'm so glad that we are now going to the main agenda of today, that is the presentations and also discussions. For today's discussions, we have two speakers. The first speakers will be from WAGI, or Women and Gender Institute, Professor Aurora Hafate de Dios. Hello, Professor De Dios, are you there? I saw her, she was sitting there, but I think probably she is going somewhere. But before we started, oh yeah, she's not here. Hello, Professor, how are you? I'm sorry, I think you are still muted.
Good. Okay.
Yes, now we can hear your voice. How are you, Professor?
Yes, very well. Thank you for inviting me to this very important program of the Indonesian Embassy.
Yeah, we are so glad to hear your presentations. I'm pretty sure it's going to be great presentations. But before we hear your presentations, I would like to hear your short CV for a while. And before we hear before I read the short CV, I would like to perhaps give some little descriptions about WAGI. Is that correct? How we pronounce it? Is it WAGA or WAGI?
WAGI.
Oh, WAGI. Okay.
WAGI means Women and Gender Institute.
Yeah, so the Women and Gender Institute, or WAGI, is Miriam Colleague's specialized center for research, training, and advocacy on women's rights, gender equality, and non-sexist learning in support of the leadership of young women and students. And WAGI is actually a Filipino word, if I'm not mistaken, which means win in English. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Yes, and the term actually epitomizes the long-term objective of Women and Gender Institute, which is to achieve women's empowerment and gender equality in society, as this will in the end result in a win-win situations for both women and men. So we are really excited to have WAGI as part of our webinar today. And as Professor Aurora de Dios herself is currently the Senior Project Director of Women and Gender Institute. She is also an Associate Professor of the Miriam College Department of International Students. She is a former WAGI Executive Director and former Dean of Miriam College Higher Education Unit. She was the Chair of National Commissions on the Role of Filipino Women from 2001 and 2003. Now called the Philippine Commissions on Women. Professor Aurora de Dios is also a former member of the UN Committee of the Eliminations of All Forms of Discriminations Against Women, or UNCEDAW, and the first Philippine representative to the ASEAN Commissions on the Promotions and Protections of the Rights of Women and Children, or ACWC. We are so glad to have you here, Professor Diaz. And now I would like to give the floor to you to have the first presentations today that will entitled Gender Equality, Equal Access to Education, Gender Pay Gap, and Equal Opportunities in Career and Workplace. Professor De Dios, the floor is yours.
Yes. Yes. First of all, I'd like to just say that I'm happy to be a guest of this important Indonesian program, because you see, I've studied in my younger days as a student. I studied Indonesia, Bahasa Indonesia. And
oh, that's really great. Can you still speak some of the language?
No, I forgot. I forgot most of it. But as ACWC expert for 6 years, my second home was Jakarta, because we had frequent meetings in the ASEAN office in Jakarta, and we had frequent meetings. And of course, I went around the cities of Indonesia, which was a very enriching enriching experience for me. I really miss Jakarta actually, and have many, many good friends there. So my presentation this afternoon, I hope Dr. Mel can help me project my presentation. It's slightly, I kind of changed it to a simple title. And the title of my presentation is, why is gender equality important? And I think I would like to just say that in order for me to focus on two very specific topics, I'd like to examine two areas. One is the area of politics and the area of economy, and how inequality is manifested in these two areas, and to talk about some of the problems and barriers there, and also to look at some of the things that we can do in order to equalize the situation of women in these two areas. Mel, can...
For a while, Ma'am, I'm asking for me to allow them to share the slide. Yeah. My sharing power is disabled.
Oh my goodness. So anyway, I think Danny also has the presentation. In the meantime, while we're waiting for it for a while, I think I also have to tell you that as student, we briefly worked in okay, there it is. There it is. Okay. So, as I said, I simply entitled it, Why is Gender Equality Important? And there's, of course, a lot of reasons why we need to still talk about this, even if both Indonesia and the Philippines have achieved quite a significant progress in working towards gender equality. We need to still discuss this constantly, because we have not achieved what I would call we have not achieved, a full gender equal society as yet. Okay, so first I'd like to just look at some of the gains achieved by women in the last 100 years, because if you now see some of the inequalities, you might be discouraged to say that it's very hard to achieve gender equality and therefore we should not put any energy to this project. But looking back, you will see that there were so many gains achieved by women and society as a whole, in fact. So for instance, 100 years ago, women were still illiterate, and many countries did not allow women to go to school, and they were just confined to the home, taking care of children, and were not able to participate in public life because precisely they have not studied the language, they have not studied any of the knowledge that were achieved at that point. So the right to education, to enter public and private schools, was achieved only about 100 years ago, in my country in any case, but also in other countries. The other right is the right to political participation. As you know, one of the oldest and perhaps one of the initial campaigns of women everywhere is the right to suffrage. No? That means that in order for them to have a meaningful role in society, they've got to be able to vote, no, and be represented in the decision-making areas of governance. The right to freedom of association, the right to freedom of speech, the right to employment, the right to health, and the right to be free from violence. So all of this taken together really forms a very, very promising environment for women to further pursue gender equality. However, despite these gains, recent trends show that such gains can be overturned if women are not organized and vigilant in fighting for their rights that have already been gained initially. Next, please. Before I go any further, let me just reiterate two concepts that I think we need to understand very well when we talk about gender equality. And that is looking at the term gender, which is something that has been discussed elsewhere and been adopted as a concept, but adopted by many countries, including mine. In fact, there's no Tagalog word for gender. I doubt if there is a native term also in Bahasa, but nevertheless, we use it as a borrowed concept, the meaning of which is socially constructed roles and relationships, traits, behaviors, values, and power ascribed to men and women by society. So gender is an acquired identity that is learned over time and varies widely across cultures. So gender roles can become stereotypes and made as a basis for discrimination. So what we term as socially constructed roles are those roles that we learn within the family context, in community, and sometimes these these roles that we believe to be our role sometimes can be unchanging. No? So for example, the notion that women should just stay at home and not do anything else, but take care of children, clean the house, cook the meals, has been changed or has been modified to say that women can participate even in public life and even in businesses, while at the same time also participating in family life. And that goes not only for women, because women have no monopoly of expertise in housework, but it also should be shared by men. So that is something that needs to be explained, needs to be learned, because we grew up, every one of us, thinking that only women should do the housework. So gender roles can sometimes become stereotyped and made as a basis for discrimination. The other term that we often use, but it's good to then be reminded what it means. Gender equality is when all human beings, men or women, are able to develop their fullest potential without the limitations and restrictions on account of gender stereotypes or prejudices. Women and men should also have the same rights, responsibilities, and opportunities. Next, please. Okay, so what do we have here? I think, as I said, I will focus on two very important areas. One is in the economy. And what I'd like to do is for us to look at the reality now, and then I think, okay, that's fine because it comes in the next slide. So the economy first. In the world today, women are half of the workforce, but only generate 37% of the GDP. That means to say that even if they're equal in numbers, no, working women, but they generate less income to the economy because of certain limitations. You can already see why women are held back in fully participating in the economy, perhaps because many of them become mothers and then, retire from work early in their lives. In the Philippines, for example, it's quite ironic that although we are part of the 20 countries that have achieved, significant gender equality, it's in the labor force participation where we are backward. No? So for example, women in the labor force only accounts for 50% for the last decade or so, which is quite ironic because 90% of women have finished college, and have been quite educated. But what is the reason why they are not in the formal labor force? Also, this might give us a clue. 75% of unpaid care work, which is what they do, taking care of children, the elderly and the sick, and doing the housework, is done mostly by women, no? And this is something that sometimes holds them back, particularly when they have a lot of children. In the sector, for example, half of the workforce there are also composed of women, but there is a 13% pay gap for the work that both men and women are doing, no? The same types of work. On average, Filipino men earn between 15.7 and 6.2%, which is also more than what Filipino women. So there's a serious wage gap there. Next, please. Also, if you look at many companies and businesses, women are mostly placed in support management functions, such as human resource and finance and administration, while men are concentrated in management functions. And very few women really achieve that level where they are into become CEO or the top management echelon. And this is what we call glass ceiling, because you might ask the question, why? And very often there are notions that say women are weak, especially in decision making, and that they will get pregnant and therefore they will leave their jobs, they will be inefficient. Also, the issue of sexual harassment is still very pervasive in many work contexts. And because there is no explicit policy against sexual harassment policy, the women are then discouraged to continue working because of this threat to their persons. Next, please. Okay, I am missing the what they call this, the part about about the politics. Yes. Let me just check my anyway. In the case of politics, can you look down for my other in the next? Okay. In government positions, it did not appear. Okay. It's the economy is coming out, but the ones in politics are not. But let me finish with the economy first. I will find it in a while. What are the barriers in promoting gender equality in the workplace? As we have seen, there are some problems there. And this is coming from the words of the business women, no? And they say that the barriers in promoting gender equality in the workplace, and this is a quote from them, "The main challenge for me as a woman business owner is the daily sexual advances from male customers and men who represent offices that provide catering services, that I provide catering services." So obviously she's a businesswoman. And some demand sex before awarding a contract. And the other businesswoman says, "When I started practicing law, there were partners and men that work for who asked me to make them coffee or pick up their dry cleaning simply because I was a young woman. So they think that they can order me around to do these kinds of services for them. So let me. Okay. So let me just finish here and I'll go to politics in a while. Some common assumptions across the different businesses is that, women who have children will want to stay at home to look after them or will want to work part-time. Men will be the breadwinners in the family and therefore wouldn't want to take paternity leave or flexible work arrangements. And all women, this is usual assumption, all women will choose to become mothers. Okay, and therefore, in business, that's considered a hindrance because one, women will absent themselves when they're pregnant, and two, that they are entitled to maternity benefits that the company has to provide. Next, please. Next, please. Also, women face sociocultural norms that limit their recognition in both public and private businesses. And female entrepreneurs face discrimination from male customers, business partners who prepare to engage with men. Some businesses do not wish to deal with women because they are not taken seriously. So I'd rather, work with a male manager. In Malaysia, it may be socially acceptable for a woman to establish a business, but women face discrimination with male suppliers and customers, as has been pointed out. And there are also negative perceptions of female business leaders, which is exacerbated but by the different business companies who also maintain such stereotypical notions of women's ability. Next, please. Very often, because women do not get the kind of training in businesses, there is what we call the entrepreneurial skills gap. They have no sufficient or adequate entrepreneurial training and mentoring programs, which hinder their growth to becoming very efficient business managers. They also have financial problems in accessing finance and markets, simply because very often women don't own assets and land to their name. So very often it's named after the brother, it's named after the husband, and so they cannot use any kind of collateral in order to fund their businesses. And then, of course, another problem is that women also cannot get to the larger markets because they have limited business networks. What do I mean by that? Well, it means that women business owners, do not have, like fraternity brothers. They do not work late during Fridays, not drinking with other business leaders. So women are they go straight home and take care of children. And therefore, it also limits their kind of network. Nowadays, there are business women's associations all across Asia. And Indonesia is one of the fastest growing business associations of women. And I think that helps them a lot to overcome these barriers. Now, let me now go to the reality check of women in government positions, which has been omitted in the PowerPoint for some technical reason. Let me just say that in politics, as of September 2021, there are only 26 women serving as heads of state and or in government positions in 24 countries. So this means that out of the 185 countries, only 24 countries have women heads of state. At the current rate, because it's so slow in gaining balance, gender equality in politics, according to UN Women, it will take 130 years to equalize the numbers for men and women to become heads of state. That's a long time. I'm not alive, we'll all be dead by that time. So just 10 countries have a woman head of state and 13 countries have women heads of parliaments. So this is some of the realities in politics that we face. What about the barriers that they face in politics? Can we go down? And do you have a PowerPoint there at the next slide? Yeah, okay, we have it. So what are some of the barriers that women face in politics? A lot, actually. So women are sidelined in decision making, and the stigma against women still remains. They continue to face structural, socioeconomic, cultural and institutional barriers. For one thing, I don't think men experience violence. No, when you're a politician, you are threatened, you are killed, you are also harassed. No, but the way women are attacked in politics is quite different and quite alarming also, because violence against women in politics includes such things as sexual harassment before, during, and after elections. Violence such as threats, misogynist remarks and insults, particularly online. This is the medium of choice of harassers, is online. It is a major challenge for women in politics. So sometimes, and this is according to our candidates or our local women leaders, they say that your opposition attacks you by looking at your personal life. And if you had many or some relationships in the past, they will expose that to the public and say that this candidate is unfit to become a leader because she is immoral. Now, on the other hand, if men have a lot of women relationships or many wives for that matter, then, the public doesn't seem to care, no? And so there is a kind of double standard for women in politics and men in politics. Next, please. Also, women politicians are often portrayed as incompetent and weak. When they are elected, they are assigned to the soft aspects of governance. For example, many women find themselves being assigned in the health and beautification aspects, no, or projects, or they may be assigned to provide, the cultural part of politics, and never are they included in issues like negotiation in peace processes, also in the finance department, or holding programs like the budget, or even the military. Something which should be done because women offer a different perspective on these issues, and may in fact provide a stronger governance style. So traditional norms, expectations, and stereotypes are used against women candidates. Why are they not attending to their children first? Why are they running? Does that mean that they will neglect their family? So this is not a good example of a woman candidate. So separated women particularly are not seen as good examples for women, and having relationships implies immorality. So these are the kind of judgments that are thrown in the way of women candidates. Next, please. So then why do we need more women leaders in politics? What are some of the, we have discussed the barriers, but now we talk about we need women in politics. We need more of them, not less, because women leaders bring a different perspective and a different set of priorities, and I might say a different governance style. Women, according to a study done by the World Bank, that women are better crisis managers. particularly during this COVID pandemic, everywhere, no, as exemplified by New Zealand, women are able to do things faster, provide humanitarian and health services, provide a different perspective for peace, security, and humanitarian assistance, and deliver without fuss and without delay. And this is true, for example, in the case of a woman candidate, Vice President Leni Robredo, even if she was sidelined in government and with very little resources, she was able to reach the remotest places in the Philippines and provide immediate assistance during natural disasters and during the pandemic. So also in a woman's life, wearing different hats within the roles is often a common occurrence. No? Women are used to doing several things at a time. They balance careers, households, along with many other duties in the community. This helps women leaders to quickly adjust to new situations and finding solutions to real life issues. In other words, what I'm saying is that there are things that women can do effectively and quickly that because she's used to doing several things at a time. So there is that kind of flexibility and versatility. Next, please. And this is what we need nowadays during our crisis period. Now, if we do have women in businesses, in the economy, as well as in politics, what kind of benefit should we derive from this, equalizing the chances and opportunities for women? According to a study that was done on Southeast Asia, female entrepreneurs in Southeast Asia catalyze the growth of women in the workforce because they also tend to employ a lot of women, many of which are poor. And then also another study of Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Thailand showed that women business owners hired 17 more female employees than male owners did. For example, in Indonesia, women-owned firms employed were 45% female, while male-owned firms were only 27 female. Therefore, easing female entrepreneurship and supporting the growth of female-owned firms is likely to also increase the availability of jobs for women. So I think this is, an advantage for the economy because you tend to expand the economy and to tap those women who would otherwise not join the labor force, the formal labor force. Next, please. Okay, and also the benefits to women in the economy. I think we have more or less discussed that, have we? Benefits of women in business. And I think of women are now cropping up in ASEAN as well as in each individual country in Southeast Asia. Now, what do we need to empower women in politics? Given that we have, a lot of barriers, we have a lot of problems, but at the same time, we also see the benefits, the positive contribution of women. Well, the example of Angela Merkel is, of course, an outstanding woman leader. We have the examples in Southeast Asia. We have elected Cory Aquino, Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo. You have your own Megawati Sukarno-Putri, and many other examples. Of course, they're not perfect. Women leaders are not perfect at all. But they bring in, as I said, for the sake of fairness, we need to equalize. Women, in fact, vote more than men. There are more women voters, at least in the Philippines, but they're not represented equally in parliament as well as in the executive decision-making branch of government. So what do we need in order to empower women in politics as well as in the economy? First of all, I think most countries in Southeast Asia have ratified the CEDAW. This is the UN Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. That is to say, it is a Bill of Rights of Women in order for countries to follow, no? Because these are very specific provisions that say that countries or states should encourage women in the economy and allow them to participate fully by giving them the legal rights to to land and other assets that will help them to participate in the economy. It also allows women in Article 7 to participate and be elected in politics. And so this is like the framework for women's legal rights. Second is, of course, the Beijing Platform for Action. 25 years ago, 40,000 women gathered in Beijing in order to have an action plan. And I think this is the most extensive, comprehensive action plan that women and government should follow even up to today, because it's very, very relevant still. Thirdly, in order for women to be enabled to participate fully in politics and the economy, you need enabling conditions. And one of the conditions would be to pass laws and policies that address the following. One, addressing particularly the barriers. One, violence protection from violence against women, especially from domestic violence, trafficking, sexual harassment, especially the protection. That includes also the protection of children. Second, we need to have economic policies that provide incentives to women to enter the workforce and make it safe for them to be free from sexual harassment. And third, for laws and policies to change traditional norms and promote gender equality in the family, community, and society. Next, please. Is that possible at all? Now, let's see some of the steps to transform the workplace. It's possible and it's doable because many countries are already adopting it. And I think many of these also have been adopted in Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, and the ASEAN countries. Make a commitment to gender inclusivity in hiring and promotion process in government as well as in private companies. So there shouldn't be any kind of discrimination on the basis that I'm a woman and therefore I'm presumed to be weaker, I'm presumed to be less efficient than men. That kind of discrimination should go. The other is to be aware of gendered language and practices and educate all employees about gender inclusive language. So this is something that we are not quite aware about, but most of our language are also male-centered. So we still use the term chairman, even if the one presiding during the meeting is a woman. So we need to use a more appropriate term like chairperson, no? And also, to eliminate those language that tend to favor and exclude others, no? So for example, in the hiring processes, in advertisements, for example, in the past, secretary wanted, must have a measurement of 35-24. What is the relevance of body measurement in hiring a secretary? Can't a secretary be also a male, no? And at the same time, when you're hiring an engineering, a position for an engineer, you'd say must be male. Why can't an engineer be a woman as well? No, so things like that should really be examined as a policy. And as somebody who has worked with the gender forum group of ADB, I'd like to tell you that ADB has a fantastic gender sensitive hiring and promotion policy. And they even count every year the number of positions where women and men should be equal or at least balanced, no? Up to the CEO level, project manager, country manager. So something like that can be not all at once, not at the same time, but we can do it step by step. Also, workplace gender diversity helps increase diversity. Why do we need to do it? No, of course, these days also we need to include the LGBT, women and men, without discrimination and prejudice, because an inclusive workplace increases productivity, creativity, and improves performance, staff retention, and it really reinforces collaboration in business. So in a recent workplace study, 21% of businesses are more likely to experience above average profitability if workforce is gender sensitive. So that means inclusive of women also and LGBT. Next, please. So I think we're nearing our conclusion. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay, we're having some technical difficulties here. So yes, what are some of the factors that can enable women's political and economic empowerment? So we discussed a little bit of the steps that can be taken, but generally, to empower women economically, politically, and even in the cultural aware and be knowledgeable about technical matters such as the budget, as well as education, as well as issues of peace and security. Women should also have access to quality, decent, paid work and must not be discriminated. The reason why we have such a low level of labor participation, I think because of two issues. One is sexual harassment, and the other one is the discrimination in hiring and promoting women. Address unpaid care and work burdens. That means that if women are able to go to work, we must be able to provide child care. The best is, of course, if the child care is within the company or within the workplace, but also community-based child care will enable women to do work at the economic level. Access to property, assets, and financial services, training in leadership in both economics as well as politics, social protection, legal, regulatory, and policy framework, and changing discriminatory gender norms and practices. So in conclusion, next please. I think I have my conclusion. Including gender as part of the framework in politics and economic decision-making transforms political, economic, culture, and ethics into a diverse, inclusive, and gender equal society that transforms society itself. I think it is to the advantage of society to adopt gender equality because it impacts on all levels of political and economic life. laws on and policies on gender equality, inclusion and diversity in both public and private sector should be institutionalized and consistently promoted. And women's active participation in politics and the economy will enhance, facilitate, and strengthen the development of society, development of a democratic, people-centered, and gender-equal society. And the last slide, I think, there is one more slide, please. Okay, so I think that just to conclude my remarks this afternoon, it's rather long, I'm so sorry. But gender equality has not been, to achieve gender has not been easy. It's been quite a struggle for many, many years by men, by women. But also may I say that men have also, a lot of men have been supportive of gender equality, and we need them for, in order to institutionalize gender equality. So gender equality, the struggle for gender is not linear, it's not sequential. Some countries may adopt changes and some may have been quite slow to adopt gender equal policies, but it's happening. So the whole tapestry of success and failures and stories of women is something that we need to understand. But at the core of it, women need to fight for their rights because many of those that have been won already will only redound to the benefit of society, not just for women only. And the struggle for gender equality is a continuing process of engagement at every level and is led by every woman who realizes that the world, our society treats women in an equal way. And may I say as a last word that gender equality is for the benefit and growth and development of the whole society, and it is for generations of young women and men who will enjoy the fruits and the benefits of our labor towards gender equality. So thank you all very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Professor De Dios, for the very nice presentations. We truly enjoy the presentations. And there is one thing that I could really relate from your presentation was the woman in politics and also in government sectors, because even though myself, I'm not in the politics sectors, but I'm actually working for the government. And I myself receive a lot of questions from my colleagues whenever they know that I work as a diplomat. They will be right away asking about how I will take care of the family if I continue staying at the job and keep on moving from one country to another country. And not once of my male colleagues actually asked this question. So whenever I got asked these questions, I always ask them, like, why do I get these questions and my male colleagues do not get the questions?
Not get them, yes,
precisely. The points that you highlight about the change of the traditional norms, that somehow, even though we already have lots of achievement within the past 100 years, the traditional norms within the society can still actually hamper women to go into the workplace. So it's really interesting discussions that you brought to us this afternoon. And now we would like to hear from the second speaker, which I'm pretty sure it's going to be more fruitful discussions because she will be sharing from the Indonesian perspective. Before I introduce Ms. Naila Rizky Zakia as the second speaker, I would like to remind everyone that after these sessions, we will have discussions. So I would like to invite all the participants to ask questions or even put comments to any of the speakers, because that will be more of the fruitful discussions. So Ms. Naila, how are you?
Hi, Mbak Wita or Miss Wita. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I saw you were in the train earlier.
Yeah,
It's still on the way.
already at the hotel.
Yeah, so I think you are now already in a nice place to actually present. I have the presentations, but before we start the presentations, I would like to introduce a little bit about Ms. Naila. Ms. Naila is advocacy advisor from Lintas Feminist Jakarta. Jakarta Feminist is a feminist organization based in Jakarta, which promotes feminist value to achieve gender equality and gender justice. Established in 2014, Jakarta Feminist became a catalyst for women's rights movement in Indonesia by bridging the grassroots movement with the young and urban feminists. Jakarta Feminist initiated several events in Jakarta, such as Women's March Jakarta, Feminist Festival, and currently have focused on providing information regarding service provider for sexual and gender-based violence through carilayanan.com. I'm actually I'm a biggest fan of Jakarta Feminist. When I was in Jakarta, I always follow the whatever event that you organize. That's really brilliant, and it's really actually very uplifting for us, the young woman in Jakarta. And Ms. Naila is currently working as advocacy officer of Lintas Feminist Jakarta. She leads advocacy work on gender-based violence, sexual violence, protections of the rights of women and vulnerable groups, established and built relationship with government agencies, conducting research on gender-based violence during the COVID-19 pandemic, facilitate various trainings on Gender 101 and how to fight sexual violence, compiling press releases and policy papers on women issues, human rights, and vulnerable groups. She's also working with other people from Lintas Feminist Jakarta to develop an anti-sexual policy for the Indonesian Embassy in Seoul and held Women's March Jakarta 2021. This is very interesting, Ms. Naila, because I know that you were working with our embassy in Seoul, and actually we hope that we can also work together with you and Lintas Feminist Jakarta here for our embassy in Manila. And now we have also our ambassador here. I hope that after this we can still collaborate in the future for more trainings about how to fight sexual harassment or sexual violence. As Professor Didios also mentioned earlier, that still there are a lot of sexual harassment at the workplace that becomes one of the barrier for Indonesia. And as our ambassador mentioned earlier, that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has issued the Ministry of Foreign Affairs regulations concerning guidelines for implementations of gender mainstreaming in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And Indonesian Embassy here in Manila also has issued decree signed by the ambassador himself regarding the establishment of a gender mainstreaming working group at the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia in Manila. So we are so glad to have you here to share with us about gender equality, especially the challenge and opportunity in Indonesian context. You have about 15 to 20 minutes for the presentations, and we would like to proceed with discussion sessions right after that. Ms. Naila, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Mbak Wita. Hopefully that everyone can hear my voice clear. Okay. Thank you for the introduction. We in Jakarta Feminist actually are very happy to have a collaboration with government agencies. Yes, correct that we have assisted KBRI in Seoul to develop their anti-sexual harassment policy, and we hope that more government agency have this kind of policy, so we can end the sexual violence in the workplace. Well, I would also thank you to Embassy in Manila for inviting Jakarta Feminist, so we can share and learn from both Indonesia and the Philippines regarding the situation of gender equality, as well as the challenges and opportunity that we have. And also, I'm so glad that I have opportunity to be in one panel with Professor Aurora. So I will start my presentation. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so just like Professor Aurora mentioned earlier about the gender equality, especially in a political and economic system. So for decades, we have been talking about gender equality, and some people say we have achieved gender equality, but some still think that it's still a long journey. We are still struggling to achieve the gender equality. In Indonesia, many people argue that men and women now have the same rights and opportunity, that we are equal now, because many women can participate in social and political life. Women can vote, can go to work, can be a leader. We had a female president, just like Prof. Aurora mentioned. We have Ibu Megawati Soekarno Putri as our president. And then we have currently our chief of parliament is a woman. And then we have female ministers, mayor, governor. Many women are in place. But compared to male leader, how many women in leadership compared to the male leader? It's still so few. As you can see here, even at the global level, it is still male dominated. Only few women have the opportunity to get to those positions. I would also highlight what Prof. Aurora stated earlier about the barriers that women have to face in political sector. So it is difficult for women to achieve certain level of leadership because they or women often get harassed sexually. And also women have a barriers in a lack of financial resources. And society often question the ability of women to lead. For example, like what happened in the US election when Trump accused Hillary was using woman card. So Hillary can be candidate for president is because she's a woman, so she is using the woman cards. So that kind of stereotype still rooted in our society. So in the end, men are still in power to decide what best for our society. Even if women can be a leader, there is a big question internally in the women movement itself. Do they really represent all the women? If we have a women president or women politician, do they really present all women? Do they have a good understanding on gender issue? Because somehow it does not reflect in their policy. We don't see that women's rights or gender issue becomes a priority, even if we have a female president. So having a representative in the politics is not enough for us. We need substantial participation. We need more opportunity. We need how to say it, like a radical revolutionary to transform the society itself, so we can have a meaningful participation of women. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. Are we okay? Well, in order to achieve gender equality, we are not only need more women in leadership, but we also need to eliminate all kind of sexual and gender-based violence. It could be physical, emotional, online, sexual, gender-based violence, or other systemic discrimination against women and marginalized groups. So men and women and other gender identity can have equal access and opportunity. But unfortunately, we still have many challenges to ending all kind of sexual and gender-based violence. So in Indonesian context, besides the rampant sexual and gender-based violence against women, we still have many challenges. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, such as we are still lacking in protection for, can we go to the next slide? So this is the global survey that 1 in 3 women actually experienced gender-based violence. So this is the challenges. Okay, to the challenges slide. Okay, thank you. So beside the rampant GBV cases, we also face another challenge, such as we are still lacking in a protection for victims and survivors. We still don't have a comprehensive laws on sexual violence. Currently, we are advocating RUU Tindak Pidana Kekerasan Seksual or Anti-Sexual Violence Bill in Parliament that we already advocating since 2014, but until now is still not passed. It's still on the discussion in the Parliament. And then another challenge is the rising of religious conservatism. As you can see in this slide, there is a picture of women bring a poster. It said Indonesia tanpa feminis or Indonesia without feminist, uninstall feminism. So this picture is taken during the protest of anti-sexual violence bill. So they are bringing poster and campaign material, which actually saying that they against the anti-sexual violence bill. So this is currently the situation of how to say it, challenges that we face, that the religious conservatism try to push back our gender equality agenda. And the next challenges is rape culture in the media and criminal justice system, as well as in the society in general. This rape culture have discouraged the victim to tell their story or report their cases. Another challenge is pandemic COVID-19, which put most of us in difficult situation. And for victim of domestic violence, it worse. It put them in a very dangerous position where they have to live with their perpetrator and could not access any kind of assistance or support because they are isolated in their home. Without pandemic, it is already hard for victims to get sufficient support because of the lack of service provider. So pandemic make it worse. And the last challenges is the repressive and authoritarian regime that maybe the Southeast Asia countries, I think we have similar situation regarding this phenomena. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so I would like to bring some Indonesian context here. In 2021, National Commission on Violence Against Women reported that there are 338,000 cases of gender-based violence across Indonesia, which we believe that this number is only the tip of the iceberg, because many victims couldn't have the courage or chance to report their cases. So we believe that there are many cases of GBV in Indonesia, but still unreported. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is we have this number from LBH Apik Jakarta report that during the pandemic, the sexual and gender-based violence have increased significantly, especially during the lockdown, where most of the victims have to stay with their perpetrator. Besides, the pandemic have also moved most of our activities from offline activity to online space. And it turns out that that it also brings sexual violence to our online and digital space. And although the number of sexual and gender-based violence cases is increased year by year, but only few victims or survivors reported their case to the police or to service provider. According to our report, next slide, only 57% of victims or a survivor is actually reaching out to their friends, parents, partners, and only 9% of the victims that actually come to service provider. So according to this report, there are 91% of victims who didn't get proper treatment or intervention for their recovery. Most of the victims didn't report their case because of the lack of evidence, which will make them questioned, mostly with victim blaming tone. Usually the police officer, the legal enforcement agency, law enforcement agency will question them whether the rape is happening or not. And the rape culture and victim blaming practices also have discouraged victims to report their cases. And unfortunately, it is a normal practice. In several years ago, one of the chief of police in Indonesia even stated that it is normal, it is okay for police, for investigator to ask whether the victim enjoy or feel comfortable during the rape or not, to prove whether the rape is happened or not. So it's a really bizarre that it's stated by the law enforcement agencies. But we also how to say it? We also not surprised because the victim blaming and rape culture is also normalized in our society. Besides that, the information regarding service is not accessible enough. Only few people know where to go when sexual violence happen to them. Another obstacle that victims or survivors may face if they speak up is, I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, I think I missed one slide. Next slide, please. Next. Okay. So another obstacles is that if the victim or survivor speak up about their cases, there will be a threat from or retaliation from the perpetrator, and usually the perpetrator will use ITE law to silence them. So a victim are often accused of defaming the alleged perpetrator, not to mention that this law also can criminalize the victim of online sexual violence, because it stated that everyone who distribute or provide access to sexual content will be in prison. So if there is a victim who send nudes or other sexual content consensually to their partner, then the partner share it to other people or make it public. So both the perpetrator and the victim can be prosecuted. That's why we, the women's rights activists, actually urge the government and the parliament to revoke and the provision in the ITE law. Because it's a really a big threat for not only women's rights activists, not only the victim, but it's a threat to our democracy. Next. So beside all the challenges that we have, can we go to previous slide? I think I switched the slide. Okay. Yes, in this slide. Thank you. So this is also one of the biggest challenges in achieving gender equality in Indonesia, which is the conservative groups movement. So they are not only maintaining the status quo, which put men in a highest position, or what we call patriarchy, but they actually having their own agenda and set their agenda strategically to, to restrict women, to corner or marginalize women and other minority. They use every avenue to, for example, criminalizing premarital sex, criminalizing sex education, all type of abortion, and homosexual sex. In 2016, they filed a constitutional court petition, asking the Constitutional Court to criminalize consensual sex outside marriage, and as well as homosexual sex. This attempt is actually failed because the Constitutional Court rejected their petition, but the conservative group continued to advocate this criminalization through legislative process. So they proposed to the parliament to criminalize consensual sex outside marriage or premarital sex, and criminalizing contraceptive education and sexual education through the how to say it, KUHP criminal code bill. So they really use every measure, every avenue to to criminalize consensual sex, educational sex education, and etc. As well as what their goal is. One of their goal is to criminalize homosexual sex. They would like to put LGBT people in prison, and and they actually fail in the national level, but they then go to the local level, local governments. So they propose to the local government to make a discriminatory bylaws that will criminalize LGBTIQ individual. They also have this family resilient bill that has been proposed to the parliament also, which will legalize the conversion therapy for LGBTIQ people. So that's actually one of the agenda of these conservative groups. Okay, can we go to next slide? Okay, thank you. So also I forgot to mention about the internal challenges in our movement. It's actually I also would like to highlight what Bapak Embassies, Bapak Duta Besar said earlier in his speech, that we also need men to fight gender inequality, because in our society, many people still think that gender equality is a woman issue. So men are not obliged to take a role in achieving gender equality. For example, when we talk about sexual violence, when we are advocating the anti-sexual violence bill, then people would say that, oh, this is a woman thing. This is not a man thing. This is not man issue. This is woman issue. The fact that we need men to actively involve in this fight, because sexual and gender-based violence can affect and happen to men too. So, but despite all the challenges, we still have hope. We still have some opportunity to continue our fight. First of all, we have seen that feminist movement grow stronger. Many young women are aware and take a part in the feminist movement. They went down to the street for International Women's Day, as well as a May Day. So they joined in solidarity with the labor. In 2016, Jakarta Feminists also initiated Women's March Jakarta as part of our solidarity to fellow women activists in US at the time. But now, from Women's March Jakarta as international solidarity, we have built a Women's March Indonesia with more than 20 branches of Women's March in Indonesia. So we aim to create safe space for young feminists to learn and advocate our rights. And in Indonesia also there is a male collective called Aliansi Laki-Laki Baru, or Alliance for New Men, which focus on gender equality and targeted male audience. So they campaigning about the role of men in family, in doing domestic work, and breaking the toxic masculinity culture. So I think this is a very good initiative. And another opportunity that we have is internet. Internet has a significant role today. We use internet or digital platform and digital tools to produce campaign materials, to develop strategy, to share information, to debunk hoaxes or misinformation, to break gender bias, as well as to provide assistance for victim and survivor. We also can use internet to build borderless network to support our fellow women in another country, just like what we are doing today, collaborating with feminists in Philippines, in Malaysia, in Southeast Asia countries. So this is one of the opportunity that we can use to make the feminist movement stronger. So with all the opportunity that we have, so we are ready to continue our fight. So currently we are advocating, next slide. So currently we are advocating many legal aspects. First of all is we are trying to advocate the sexual violence bill that now has been in the parliament. We hope that the government and the parliament can pass this law in this year. And then the second is the protection of domestic worker bill, because we do not have any kind of legal protection for domestic worker. And then also we fight for the indigenous people bills, and we also fighting for against the discriminatory laws and policies such as criminal code bill, which have provision to criminalize premarital sex, abortion, and then sex education and homosexual sex. We also against the omnibus law. This law is basically it's a threat for the workers. And then we also against family resilience bill and anti-LGBT bylaws, and the last is the ITE law. Next slide. This is the non-legal advocacy that we are fighting for. First is ending child marriage and ensure that children have the right to education, continue their education. Today we already changed the law. So before the how to say it, usia perkawinan, marriage, the age of marriage is 16, but now it's changing to 19. So this is also one of the achievement of women's movement, that we can change the law to end child marriage. And the second is we also fighting for to increase service provider for SGBV victims, as well as fulfill the women workers' right. And also we also advocating the sexual and reproductive health and right education, affordable and non-discriminatory sexual and reproductive health services, as well as we also fighting to increase the representation of women in parliament and judicial system, because women representative in a judicial system is a very low. In constitutional court, we only have one female judges, and it's one in 9 judges in constitutional court. So we still need more women in legal system. And then we also need to fulfill and protect the indigenous people rights, as well as ending the sexual gender-based violence against women and marginalized groups. Next slide. So yeah, intersectionality is a must. The operation against LGBTIQ, against workers, against people with disability, indigenous people, will also oppress or affect women. So we need to work with intersectional framework to address every layer or every layer of oppression that we have. So for the closing, I would like to quote Audre Lorde that I'm not free while any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are very different from my own. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Naila, for the presentation that is very interesting and also very fruitful to give us more insight and also information about challenges and opportunities in Indonesia. We are currently a bit late from our schedule because we are supposed to finish at 4, but I would like to request maybe for everyone, if it is okay for us to have some extra 15 minutes for questions and answers session, because I believe there are some questions that comes from the participants. So in these sections, I would like to invite everyone from the participants to raise the questions or put some comments, either for both speakers. Perhaps I would like to invite Ambassador, if Ambassador would like to add some comments or perhaps have the questions, because I was actually looking at the Ambassador, and the Ambassador himself looks very interested with our discussions today. I think the discussions about feminism or about gender issues are not really widely discussed in the context of maybe government issues, because as Ms. Naila mentions at the very beginning, that people seem to believe that we are already unequal, because we see a lot of people in the government, like even our minister herself is a female, Ibu Retno Marsudi. Pak Dubes, would you like to add some questions or comments for our discussions today?
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. You are very brave in addressing the first question to me.
Please don't call me to your office after this, sir.
Okay, for both panelists, is there anything that relates to culture that forms as one of the one of the barriers to gender equality? What I'm thinking of is that why are advanced Western countries, have a lesser problem with this issue, whereas the developing countries have a higher level of issue or higher level of problems in this issue. Is there something like cultural relativity? How do you read that? Thank you for both panelists.
Yeah, I think I would like to give the floor directly to both panelists. Maybe Professor De Dios would like to respond to the ambassador's questions first. Yes.
Are you calling for Naila first?
You can go first, Professor.
Okay. I think the situation in, particularly in Nordic countries, where gender equality has been achieved through institutional, political, and cultural changes, have less issues with culture, because I think in general they are more sectarian than, and religion, while important, does not have that kind of grip over their culture. And so I think it's much easier to introduce reforms and particularly cultural changes, and is embraced by society itself. But also remember that they have, smaller populations and less diverse cultures. So for instance, New Zealand is an example. Has about 15 million people as opposed to our population, which is, 200 plus million. Ours is about 100 million with, and it's archipelagic with different sorts of cultural practices and characteristics. So I think that the kind of diversity and complexity of our cultural setup is quite different. In New Zealand, for example, when I was there a couple of years ago, when I was speaking in a foreign policy conference, I did not hear any complaint about their Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, who was at the time taking a leave of absence because she was pregnant. And she's pregnant and not married to her partner. If you put that kind of situation, the Philippines, or Indonesia, that would raise, a political tsunami because it's not acceptable. Why? Because in the Philippines, marriage, particularly in a union, is so important that the Catholic Church would raise an issue for having a leader such as Jacinda Ardern. And yet I didn't find any, objection from the men. No, they were quite comfortable with having a woman president or prime minister who is efficient, who is strong, but did not fit the traditional norm of a woman who should be married, staying at home because she has a child. She even brought her baby, in the UN, as you can remember, and also in Parliament in New Zealand. So I think that's one very important difference. Our cultures are more diverse, more complex, and we deal with a huge population that are many, a big percentage of which is impoverished. The social conditions are not that ideal. So the issues, gender issues are quite, and traditional norms and stereotypes of women and men are quite embedded in cultural, in our cultures. What makes it, but having talked about culture is not permanent. No? Culture is always evolving, it's dynamic, and it lends itself to change over time. And as I said, we have to look historically, in historical perspective, to see what has really changed. And it is possible to do that. It's possible not in one fell swoop, but through the factors like, as I said, legislation, policy reform, as well as awareness raising. The Nordic countries underwent some 40 years of gender, awareness raising among their population, which is small compared to our, huge population. So that's also one of the difference. And I think while we're making progress, our progress is quite a bit slow, but we are making progress. I think we are making progress despite the resistance. And social change in a general way really is a contestation of, clashing attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. That's always intention. But and at the end, I think because we always improve our standard of not only social services, but also well-being as well as attitudes that are healthy for our society. So we know that violent extremism is unhealthy and is harmful to the people. We know that without, for example, reproductive rights for women is going to kill hundreds of, will result in the deaths of many women who are not unable to access reproductive health care. So I think slowly but surely we are introducing changes in very strategic areas to achieve gender equality. And it will take time. I think it will take time, but I've been to Indonesia many times and I'm very, very impressed with, with the changes that have happened, because for the last so many years I've been coming and going. And also in the Philippines, it was not like this. When I was growing up, I didn't know anything about gender. But thank you, Ambassador. That is a very, very challenging question.
Thank you, Professor De Dios, for the answer, and thank you for the ambassador for very interesting questions. I think we have one. Ms. Nella would like to add some answer.
Thank you. So I think that it's maybe because it's a part of the effect of colonialization, I guess. So we cannot how to say it? We cannot just say that okay, the Western country is have a progressive progressive policies or laws, and we are maybe backwards and etc. But I think it because the global North country have colonized the global South country for ages. And it maybe hamper us to, to achieve that kind of transformation in terms of gender norms and etc. So that's must be we have to make that as consideration why we have this complexity, because we've been colonized for ages, and then that's why we cannot make such improvement. And the second is, I think it's also not entirely true that the Western country is way better than us in terms of gender equality, because in some countries in the West, they still do not provide menstrual leave or maternity leave. In Indonesia, we already have that since years ago. And don't forget that the US, the America, never have female president, but we have female presidents. We have, yes. So I think we can count it as achievement too. And I think it's we cannot like simplify that Western is better than us and etc. Because we have such Professor Aurora mentioned that we have different culture, we have different complexity and etc. and history. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Different point of view from Ms. Naila about the colonizations or post-colonizations influence that we received during the colonial era. We have one questions, I think one from participant, Mr. Jerry Jurisprudencia, already raised the hands. I would like to give the floor for Mr. Jerry.
Thank you, moderator. Good afternoon to all the participants and to our speakers. I just would like to address this question to both of our speakers. Can our women's movement change the strategy? Like, for example, I am not sure if, for instance, our countries can recommend to our legislators to put some percentages to women so that to run as lawmakers, so that they will be encouraged and motivated to be a part of the government. Because if you simply allow everybody to run, assuming, yes, we know that it's open to all, but if you don't put some fixed percentages, women are always marginalized. Women are always not taken seriously. But if the government is serious to encourage women, why not put their 50% position should be reserved to women? I don't know if it's possible in Indonesia or in the Philippines as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jerry, for interesting questions. I think for this part, I would like to address the questions for both speakers. There might be a different answer from the Philippines and from the Indonesian side. Professor De Dios, would you like to answer the question first?
Yes. Okay, thank you, Jay. Happy to see you. You know, Jay is one of our more gender-sensitive male faculty in Miriam College. He is always around for gender and really educates himself on these issues. You know, there is one of the things that also made the Norwegian countries and some of the Western countries advance in terms of gender equality in political decision-making is that they devised a system called the quota system. That means to say that by legislation, the parliament, their parliaments are required to allot about, I think 50%, yeah, 50% of the seats in their parliament to be occupied by women. So this is by legislation. So that means that it is temporary. It's in the UN, the CEDAW, when I was sitting in the CEDAW, it's called the temporary special measures, which is in Article 3 of the CEDAW. What that means is that because it's taking such a long time for women to achieve gender equality because of the barriers, cultural, political, economic, that women face in pursuing equality, that it would take, hundreds and hundreds of years for them to achieve that, to overcome those barriers. And in order to facilitate in achieving a level, not 100%, but maybe a significant level of equality, the recommendation of the UN is that each government must allot a certain percentage. It could be 30%, maximum would be 50%. So other countries did that. I think Bangladesh also adopted that. India adopted it, and several other countries. And it would be easier in those countries with a smaller population. And as I said, where the sectarian tradition is very strong and less resistance. But you see, it's not universally accepted. But women are fighting to have that kind of temporary special measure. But not all the governments, including my own, have introduced this. It was introduced in Congress. It was resisted and eventually rejected by the male politicians. Why? It means that women wouldn't have to run for election, wouldn't have to spend, wouldn't have to campaign, and to them, it's an undue advantage of the women. But our thinking is that if we do not do that, we will never be able to achieve gender equality. So I think here we are proposing a 30% allotment for women as a temporary measure until they achieve a level of significant gain in the political balance. Unfortunately, it was rejected. That's one measure. The other is through equal representation, proportional representation in political parties. So it's called the zebra formula. What does it mean? It means that each political party is required by law to file candidates with equal numbers of men and women. So you have for one position, say president, you have and other positions you have a male, female, male, female, male, female. So that means that women will have an equal chance of running for a position, because from the party list, from the party policy itself, there is already an equal opportunity strategy in order to allow women to run for office. So it starts with the political party system, and second, it can be legislated, but only if the predominantly male lawmakers will support it. So it's a numbers game. So in the Philippines, we were defeated. And that's the reason why in other countries, they have a faster way of achieving gender equality in politics.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Diaz, for the answer. Probably from the Indonesian side, we would like to request Ms. Naila. Would you like to elaborate more on this Indonesian part?
Yeah, in Indonesian context, we have an election law that obliges the political party to have 30% of female women representative in the parliament or in the party itself. But unfortunately, it just it's just a performative action. It's not really an affirmative action, because the political party then only use women to to pass the parliamentary threshold, but not really take action to make a meaningful participation of women participation in the parliament. So there is no like political education for women. There is no women empowerment program in the politics, etc. So it's just a formality. So I think it is also a concerning issue in our political political system, because many our political system is not put women as a subject. So we still see that women still see as an object in a political sphere. So yeah, so we need not only a regulation or a policy that make the political party have affirmative action or other measure to make sure that women have opportunity in politics, but also we need to have we need to invest in education for women. We need to invest in how to empower women, so women in politics are really representing their interests, not only not only become a token in a political system.
Thank you very much, Ms. Naila, for the answer. This is very interesting answer, actually, because we see the difference between the Philippines and Indonesia in terms of this quota system. While in the Philippines itself, maybe we haven't, there is no the quota or the quota for women specific positions in the parliament. Meanwhile, in Indonesia, there exists the quota, yet in the practicality or in the field itself, there are still a lot of other problem that appears, even though the quota has already been applied. So this is very interesting discussions, I think, today that we have from the politics, economics, and also from the challenge and opportunities on violence against women and how to fight and how to promote gender equality. I think we no longer have time for discussions and questions because it's already 4:16 that we were supposed to finish at 4. I thank you so much once again. I would like to address it to the participants who have participated in today's discussions. Also, our biggest gratitude to Ms. Naila and also to Professor Aurora de Dios for joining us today in our webinar. Before I close and before I return these sessions to the Master of Ceremony, I would like to a little bit point out the conclusions of our discussion today. Despite the gains that women have achieved in 100 years, such as freedom of speech, education, recent trends still show that gains can be overturned if women are not organizing and vigilant in fighting for their rights. Therefore, organizations and gender movements are very important. There are still gaps between men and women in the workplace. Women are often placed in support management and administrations, and there are still a lot of barriers, such as harassment at the office, that somehow become the barriers at the workplace. In terms of politics and businesses and economics, women can actually provide different perspective and different set of priorities. That's why we need more women in politics as well as in business sectors. And therefore, the government, through the legislations, needs to focus on the eliminations of the violence against women, providing economic policy that provides incentive for women to enter into workplace. Change of traditional norms should also be upheld. The challenges, both in the Philippines and Indonesia, have similarities, such as rape culture and victim blaming. Radical religious movement also can hamper the gender movement, and among others are also complicated system and some law that could even criminalize the victims. The opportunities that are owned by both Philippines and Indonesians include stronger feminist movement and resilience of the people, especially from the woman itself. The internet that are getting better, international solidarity, empowered community, and innovative digital approach. To close, we need to continue our fight and struggle We need both men and women in the movement for equality. And equality does not only benefits women, but also men. Therefore, this is not just women's issues or women's problem, but this is also men's problem. So men and women indeed have different characteristics, but it should not be a discriminatory element which marginalize women. Together, we can break the bias. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you very much for all the participations, questions, and discussions today. I would like to return the floor to Ms. Chot Reyes as the Master of Ceremony. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that ends the question and answer portion. Thank you so much, Ms. Rama Juwita. That was an interesting discussion. I just hope we still have the time. But then, before I conclude, I just would like to announce that e-certificates will be sent to our distinguished speakers and to our participants as well via email. So I hope that you were able to fill in the form of which the link was sent to our chat box earlier. If not, please do so. In closing, I would like to thank once again our speakers who selflessly impart their thoughts and learnings in the name of their advocacy. Professor Aurora Havate de Dios, Senior Director of WAGI, Ms. Nalia Rizki Zakia, Advocacy Advisor of Lintas Feminist Jakarta, Miriam College Women and Gender Institute, its Executive Director, Dr. Melanie M. Reyes, WAGI's staff and network, professors, students, and everyone else who in one way or in another connected in this webinar. On behalf of the Indonesian Embassy in Manila, terima kasih banyak, maraming salamat po. Thank you very much for spending your time with us. Let us continue to fight for equality for our children and our children's children. This has been your host, Chot Reyes, saying bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Matikan aja.
Terima kasih Mbak Wita. Terima
Makasih Mbak Naila, makasih banyak ya Mbak udah gabung.
kasih. Aku pamit dulu ya Mbak.
Boleh, nanti kita ngobrol di sini ya Mbak ya.
Oke.
Bye.
Bye.